Hello, my name's Kathy Parker. I'm a Professor of Retailing at Manchester Metropolitan University and I'm the Research Lead for the High Streets Task Force. I've prepared a 20-minute slidecast to help place managers and leaders accommodate social distancing in town and city centres. The High Streets Task Force is funded by the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. It's a consortium of professional bodies, universities, data providers and organisations that have a significant stake on the high street, like markets, retailers, property owners, business improvement districts and local authorities. If you haven't heard of us yet, well, that's because we haven't officially launched. With the outbreak of COVID-19, we knew we had to act fast and start getting support materials and guidance out to place managers and leaders to help them tackle a situation they'll have never faced before. We're using the COVID-19 recovery framework to support during the various stages of the pandemic. This presentation focuses on the recovery stage and in particular managing social distancing. During the slidecast, I'm going to cover four main areas. First, a quick look at the existing guidance for England. The High Streets Task Force is an England-only initiative, but a lot of the content I cover will be relevant to other nations. I'll look at how your town's centre of gravity may change as a result of the phased reopening of businesses. We'll also establish a way of calculating capacity for social distancing to answer the question, just how many people can you fit in your town? And finally, we'll end up by looking at some practical ways of managing social distancing. In England, as in other countries, the first guidance to be published was focused on workplaces, not public spaces. Essential town centre businesses, like those selling food, have been able to open throughout the lockdown, and these businesses were of course prioritised to protect staff and customers. More guidance to cover other types of businesses has now been added in preparation for the next stage of easing lockdown restrictions, with markets and car showrooms opening on the 1st of June and other non-essential retailing opening on the 15th. The workplace guidance expects all businesses to undertake a COVID-19 risk assessment, improve hygiene and cleaning regimes, help people work from home, facilitate social distancing, and where the requisite 2 metres is not possible, manage the virus's transmission risk in other ways. Businesses are expected to fill in this checklist and display it in a prominent place. If we want people to feel reassured when they come back to our high streets, then these posters are a good way to show people that everything's being done to keep them safe. How many businesses in your town are displaying these posters? Whilst this slidecast is focused on reducing risk in public spaces, public perceptions of safety in your town will not only be influenced by how the public space is managed. It's important that businesses do everything they can to manage risk, and these blue posters signify that they're taking this responsibility. On the 13th of May, the UK government issued comprehensive guidance on safer public places for England. This document contains lots of useful information on how to make public space safer, and it's mandatory reading if you haven't read it already. The document is for guidance only, and although it's just for England, it has lots of practical interventions and advice that could be applied anywhere. The document was revised on the 22nd of May and it will be regularly updated, so keep checking the web link to make sure you've got the latest government advice. The guidance is structured around this flowchart, and the first step is to identify the public spaces that are the most likely to need interventions. This may be because they have the highest footfall or because they're constrained or contested in some way. So let's think about how we can identify high footfall areas. Obviously, you might already have automated footfall counting in your town, but unless this counts in various places, it might not help you identify the busiest parts of your town now and under the different phasing of lockdown easing. We know that the exit out of lockdown in England, like everywhere else, is being phased. We were all asked to stay home to stay safe and protect the NHS when the risk of transmission of the virus was at its highest. Now the risk level is judged to be lower. between 3 and 4 on the scale on the left-hand side. The risk level is linked to the rate of transmission, or R. The further R falls below 1, then the more restrictions can ease. The phased recovery in England has been mapped out in 3 steps. The next step, step 2, will see non-essential retail opening and some children going back to school. This starts on the 1st of June, and it will mean more people in our town centres. Because the lockdown restrictions are phased and involve different types of organisations opening on different dates, we need to think about how this impacts on footfall. This is Macclesfield in Cheshire, my hometown. When we went into lockdown or crisis in our framework, this became the busiest part of town, where a number of shops selling food were concentrated, as well as some banks. During lockdown and step 1, the red circle shows the centre of gravity, or the focal zone of the town. It's been fairly easy to manage social distancing at this stage, as there is a big gap between the shops that have been open and lots of public space and redundant car parking to accommodate any queues that formed from those stores. As we move into step 2, or our recovery stage, when the non-essential stores open, the focal zone expands to take in more shops and stores, like the shopping centre we have in the north of town. More shops being open will attract more people, but then there's also more public space for them to use to social distance. The challenge for Macclesfield, like many historic towns, will be managing small shopping streets and ginnels. As more shops open, you'll need to monitor footfall levels in your town, and whilst technology can help you do this, I think you'll still need to walk around and see how the different areas are being used. Finally, when other businesses such as bars and restaurants open, the area enlarges again. It moves south to include our local microbrewery, Wetherspoons and a popular Indian restaurant, and it also includes the station. Although everything may be open again, the parts of town that are busy may well vary during the times of the day and days of the week, so your interventions may need changing. If more people start to commute back to Manchester, then it's around the station that's going to be busiest in the morning. The platforms are very narrow, so the station may need to use some of its car park to hold the capacity of passengers that are allowed onto any trains. During the day, the shopping area will be the busiest. As I said, we've got some narrow streets in Macclesfield, so it's important to coordinate queues outside shops so that they don't impede the flow of people walking across the town. Footfall around the retail areas falls off in the afternoon, but the station area gets busy again with commuters returning. And it's the public space in this part of town that's busiest in the evening or at night time. The pubs down here have got outside space and may even be allowed to extend this, temporarily at least. Again, interventions like the demarcation of space and queuing areas, etc., may need phasing in and out accordingly. If you can identify which areas of your town are likely to be busiest or offer more challenges linked to the lockdown phases, it will make it easier if we find transmission rates rise again. The government has said it's going to take a more localised approach to managing the virus, so it's feasible that different areas of the country or even different towns could find themselves at different stages of lockdown. We may have a situation where we go back from stage 3 to stage 2 or even stage 1. If you identify how the phases will impact on different parts of your town and have a plan for identifying problems and managing social distancing if there are problems, then you can quickly move between these phases. Now I want to move on to establishing just how much capacity there might be for social distancing in your town. The guidance makes reference to operators taking all necessary steps to facilitate social distancing. This includes defining the number of customers that can fit into an environment and social distance, regulating the number of customers that enter into an environment, and also managing social distancing in public space. It's in high streets and town centres that conflict in achieving social distancing is likely to arise, especially if operators do not consider the impact of their processes on public spaces. Public space may well have capacity constraints when it comes to ensuring people can social distance. Because there's a queue here, we can assume the chemist is managing capacity in the store. The customers are all standing at least 2 metres apart, so they're doing a good job of social distancing. However, it's a narrow pavement. What happens when someone wants to pass? They might have to walk in the road. They may cross the road, but there may be similar queues on the other side. What happens when some of these queues start to merge? Managing social distancing in some public space is going to be challenging. And a good starting point is to think about capacity. Just how many people can social distance in different parts of your town? This can help you establish if it's appropriate for operators to use public space for queuing, or if more space needs to be found to allocate to queuing or to pedestrians that are trying to move around. In this picture, perhaps we need to pedestrianise all the road or part of the road. If more space can't be found for social distancing, then businesses may need to manage demand for their services in other ways. Having an idea of the capacity various spaces in your town have to accommodate social distancing will help you reconfigure your place. This is Market Street in Manchester. It's one of the busiest shopping streets and it's also an important walking route for people getting across the city. This picture was taken before lockdown. It's a fairly typical day, not particularly busy. I was interested in establishing, could this amount of people return now after lockdown and socially distance? In this picture, everyone is 2 metres apart. It's taken at Kuwait Airport. The trouble is, no one can move and still stay 2 metres apart from the person next to them without everyone else having to move. This tight configuration is not practical in public space. Along with colleagues at Cardiff University, we've been working out a way to calculate the area each person needs to social distance to allow them some freedom of movement. In other words, they can move around in an inner circle without violating social distancing space, the outer circle. Using current government guidance to stay 2 metres away from other people, we think each individual needs 12 square metres of area. If you want to know how we calculated this, or if you want to see how much area would be needed if the social distancing distance changes, then you can find our working paper in the High Streets Task Force repository. Now, I need to stress that there is no government guidance about the amount of area a person needs to social distance, not yet anyway, but it's hard to manage social distancing in public space without such a figure. It's also important to stress that we think 12 square metres is appropriate for dynamic space or space where people are moving about, like town centres. It's not necessary for environments where people are static, like if they're standing still, they're queuing or seated. Let's go back to Market Street in Manchester and assume an average area of 12 square metres per person is needed. This figure can easily be substituted if guidance changes. 12 square metres per person is generous, as not everyone who will visit the city will be alone. People may be walking in household groups where not everyone in the group needs to social distance from each other. However, on the other hand, there's trees and street furniture and other things like puddles and litter that reduce capacity. So I'll just stick with the 12 square metre figure as a guide to work out the social distancing capacity of this space. Here's an image from Google Maps of Market Street. The blue square represents the area we were looking at in the previous picture. The orientation's changed though. We were looking up the street, so if we were going to do that now, we'd be at the left of the rectangle looking left to right. Now, Google Maps has got a really neat function where you can estimate the area of any shape you want to draw. You just right click with your mouse and choose the measured distance option at the bottom of the menu. You use your mouse to draw the boundary of the shape you want to measure, and Google calculates the area for you. The total area here is 2,446 square metres. So using our estimate that each person needs 12 square metre area, how many people can social distance in that space? You might want to have a go at this yourself if you've got a calculator or a pen and paper, or maybe you can do it in your head. It's a simple calculation. It's just 2,446 divided by 12. Hopefully you got the answer right. It's 203 people. Well, it's actually a little bit more, but I've rounded down to the nearest whole person. So let's do a quick sense check. We can't see everyone in this photo, and we're only concerned with the space up to Debenhams there at the top. But counting everyone I can see, there's less than 200 people in that space. And that might seem quite surprising, but it's an important point to make. Places do not have to be deserted for people to have space to social distance. Of course, people are not social distancing in this photo because it was taken before lockdown. Calculating the capacity for people to social distance is not the same as managing social distancing. There are lots of other considerations. We know once shops and other businesses start opening, there's going to be more conflicting demands on public space. So in this last section, I'll quickly look at ways social distancing can be managed in public space. Here, shoppers are queuing at the required distance. The queue also snakes round so it doesn't block the access to the store next door, the one with the poster with the green dots on it. That's good. The shoppers are being managed in the queuing area or static space in this configuration. And they're being managed at a denser capacity. Instead of one person per 12 square metres in dynamic space, it's one person per 4 square metres in static space. For shops and other attractions that are likely to generate queues, you should consider marking out static space and increasing the density of people so you can accommodate more people in your town centre. Remember that some shops may be busy at different times, so areas for queuing may change over the course of a day or on different days of the week. Footfall monitoring or just walking around your town and speaking to businesses can help you manage the space in a responsive way. In many places, people will work things out for themselves, but we can't assume that will always happen. Our advice is to keep monitoring the situation, think ahead as to what might happen when different businesses are allowed to open, and be able to react quickly if you need to. This is preferable to introducing unnecessary demarcations, barriers and signage, which will just clutter up your town and cause people to think they're problems, even when there might not be. You can make more space for people to walk and cycle by taking space away from traffic. Here, this has been done with planters and it looks calm and attractive. On the other hand, this approach in the Netherlands doesn't look so calm and attractive. The big no entry signs, wardens, a one-way system. Whilst the expectation may be that this area becomes busy, it's not very busy at the moment, and these types of interventions could actually put people off visiting. Businesses are going to be very unhappy if they feel that your attempts to manage social distancing in the public spaces outside their stores are unnecessarily reducing their trade. This is an interesting and practical approach in Birmingham. Mowing channels in this grass identify alternative walkways for pedestrians, but with no signage, no wardens, and at very low cost. Of course, this isn't a town centre, but you may be able to use a similar principle of channelling people through different areas in your town to ease strain on the more popular parts. In really busy areas where you may not be able to channel footfall elsewhere, or where the area can't be expanded easily, then more intervention may be needed. This is Broad Street in Birmingham, where Westside Bid has installed vinyl street stickers to maximise flow of people through this space. The segmentation of the footpath and the arrows explains where people should walk. The use of yellow and black implies danger, so people are likely to conform. However, the level of intervention needs to be congruent with the risk. This is okay in a very busy area, and it's more likely to be perceived as reassuring. But if the area is not busy, then it looks excessive and hostile. That's why it's important to study movement in your centre and not do anything unless it's necessary. And it doesn't have to cost much either. Here, a new cycle path is being created just by using spray paint. Chalk, stickers, planters, all sorts of objects can help you reconfigure space quickly. We'd always recommend that you trial any intervention first. Sometimes our best intentions can have very unintended consequences. We want people to return safely to our high streets and town centres, but we also want them to find this a positive experience, and that's going to be a difficult balance. Thank you for listening to this slidecast. Please visit the High Streets Task Force website for more information and register to receive our weekly email, which is full of advice and support to help you with your COVID-19 recovery plan.